What's the story? 21 things that I hope Resident Evil 9 will do by the time it comes out in February next year. So, let's go. Number 1, perspectives are optimized. Now look, I know it's amazing. It's incredible news that we can play RE9 in both first and third person. It is incredible. It's something that we always wanted for years. But my concern is that one perspective might be more favored or suited to the game than the other. I'm kind of looking at RE8 in this example, because I don't know if anybody remembered, but they did release a gold edition of the game, or some gold DLC version, I don't know, where you could play the game in third person, and let's just say it wasn't as good as we thought it was going to be. It was clunky, it was not optimized, it was not smooth, it was jank, and the movement of it kind of felt like it was trying to be first person even though it was third. You know, when you would like hold shift and then back, you know, to run backwards, it kind of wouldn't move the same. It would remain, you would remain moving backwards the way it would in first person, kind of, you know. Look, I hope RE9 doesn't do that. I hope they invest a lot of time into both perspectives, and I'm kind of hopeful that they will do that. Number 2, a good horror action balance. Now look, I know we all love Resident Evil for its survival horror, and so do I, but I think we'd kind of be throwing the baby out with the bathwater if we were to be totally dismissive of all the action elements in the game. I do hope that there is a decent amount of action in the game, particularly in the second half of the game, because look, let's face it, in the first half of the game, you are quite unfamiliar with the game. You don't really have a lot of resources. You're just not as formidable in the world. But as you go through the game and learn more and build your arsenal, you kind of earn the right to become more of a badass. And I do think that Capcom do understand what the balance is now. They somewhat know how to walk that line now. And I hope that they continue that with Resident Evil 9. Number 3, I hope Grace is an interesting character, especially compared to Ethan, because I know a lot of people had a lot of issues with Ethan, and I get that. He was like plain pasta, to be honest. He was just so boring. And I get why Capcom made him the way he was in RE7, because he needed to be somewhat of a blank slate where we could like project our own feelings onto him, project our own personalities onto him. It was kind of good the way RE7 didn't spoon feed us, pardon the pun, but just by telling us how we should feel by hearing him grunt or hearing him say this and in this scene. But I do think that I probably would prefer, in this case now, moving on from Ethan, I hope that Grace is an interesting character with layers to her, and I hope she's human. You know, I hope that she's a very human character and vulnerable, and it looks like she is. Like, she seems to be somewhat of a legacy character, you know, born from quite an obscure character from Outbreak. But I do hope that she becomes a likable character in Resident Evil, a likable protagonist. Number 4, I hope RE9 is not too short. A lot of Resident Evil games have been a good length recently, I would say, but the one that sticks out for me was RE3 Remake. When RE3 Remake came out, I played it on the day, on stream. I took my time, I smelled the roses, I read all the files, I had fun with chat, and it took me, I think, 5.5 hours on the hardest mode that you can select first time, hardcore. I mean, that's like DLC length. Look at Separate Ways in RE4 Remake. They're like the same length, which is crazy to me, especially when Separate Ways was like $10 maybe, and then RE3 Remake was meant to be this full game, this full big open game. Well, I won't say open, but yeah, I just hope that RE9 doesn't fall into that trap. If anything, RE9 might even be a little bit too long by the sounds of it, because of how big the budget is, how long they've been taken to make it. But it is a worry of mine. I hope that we just don't finish the game and think, yeah, it wasn't as long as I thought it was going to be. So I hope it's decent length. Number 5, large open design. Now what I mean by that is, you know, I hope it obviously sticks to that same old school design, that old school Metroidvania kind of game style where there's a lot of fetch quests to get keys to open up areas and then open up new areas and then backtrack. Look, I think that's kind of a given, but at the same time, the fact that Capcom were kind of promising something, a bit of a shift in tone and gameplay, and having it sort of in the same vein as RE1, RE4, RE7, you know, where it introduced a new way of playing the game, I kind of do feel like I want them to innovate in a way. I kind of do want to see something new from Capcom with this game, because that's what they're promising us. So I do hope that they do something quite big with the design of this game. Not like where RE Village kind of hoodwinked us in a way where you played it first and you're like, wow, this is really open and wide and it's expansive, and it is, but when you play it a second time, you start to realize how kind of linear it is. You realize it's more linear than you thought it was. And I kind of don't want Resident Evil 9 to be that. I want it actually to have some genuine open areas of the game, large scale Metroidvania style game design. I don't know, I just want the game to surprise me design wise. Number 6, heavy puzzle solving. It's just a given in Resident Evil games, and a game this big and this long, presumably long, I want a lot of puzzles in the game, and not only puzzles but puzzle like environments, places that make me think, want to use my brain. I think a game like this is probably going to have a lot of puzzles. I would imagine so. Puzzles really create this variety and pace, I kind of describe it like, because you can't be playing a game that's, now, not to be picking on RE3 again, RE3 remake, but look at that, for example. That's a worry of mine as well. That game had 2, maybe 3 puzzles in the entire game. Literally something like that. Now, I know that there were some areas to the game that were kind of labyrinthian, like the hospital somewhat. You had to kind of figure out where to go, but that game had no puzzles, and I want Capcom to be able to look at a game like that and say, yeah, we don't want RE9 to be like this. We want RE9 to be puzzle heavy, and not only puzzle heavy, but puzzles that will test us and really keep us there for a while. I know RE2 Remake had some puzzles that were somewhat simple, but I would prefer, this sounds a little bit kind of vapid on my part, but I actually wouldn't mind if, I actually would prefer a lot of easy puzzles in the game as opposed to no puzzles at all, because they just serve as a good pace breaker, you know what I mean? Because if you're playing the game and you're just going through the motions of the gameplay over and over again, you're shooting enemies, that could get tedious, you know? You want to be able to use different parts of your brain. I really hope they add a lot of puzzles in the game, a lot of good puzzles. Number 7, visiting iconic locations. The RPD is a big one here. I mean, they showed the RPD in the trailer, and could you imagine if you didn't even go into the RPD in RE9? I mean, like, that would be the biggest sin Capcom would ever make, I think. I mean, that bloody trailer, that trailer that was so hyped, that had me screaming in my other video. And everybody was just like, that was the money shot of that trailer, and it even showed the inside, the main hall of the RPD. Imagine we didn't go back in. We have to go back into the RPD. This is going to be an area that everybody will be wondering about, probably the most. And not only that, but RE3 Remake had a whole city, presumably, to explore. I mean, this is really their chance to really be almost this apology for RE3 Remake, where it wasn't really that open and expansive. RE3 Remake felt somewhat linear and short. There's so many iconic locations that we could go to. I mean, imagine if we could actually go back to the clock tower. I mean, they debated us in RE3 Remake, where they just showed it to us across the bridge. Oh, now that looks like the clock tower. Okay. They did add the clock tower. We had a ridiculous boss fight in front of it, and then we just moved on. I mean, talk about sins. That was bad. Not to get overly ambitious, but the third act of the game, imagine if we could go back to the Spencer Mansion, or what's left of the Spencer Mansion. Have some sort of big, meaningful boss fight in the game. I do think that they should really focus on taking full advantage of the fact that they're in Raccoon City now and go anywhere we want in the city, essentially. Number 8. I hope the final third act isn't lackluster. I like to kind of look at previous Resident Evil games' weaknesses and then kind of focus on that and hope that they don't happen again in this game. Focusing in on what Capcom have done the past few years, they don't seem to be repeating mistakes, I will admit, but the final third of a game like RE7 on the boat was, wow. I mean, that was so grey and dull and dour and boring and slow and oh god. I know the game needed to have an area that was a bit of an exposition dump, and it was, but man, who really liked that section? It was just so like, I don't want that again. I want a really exciting location. Like I mentioned in my last point, if we could have a location in this game in the third act that's really meaningful to us, I don't think it's asking for much. Now, I do know that, you know, the third act of many Resident Evil games is probably their weakest points, because you've been through it with the game and it's hard for you to see anything new, or, you know, it's hard for anything late in the Resident Evil game to fully shock you, bar maybe the regenerators in RE4. I just want to see them have quite a strong third act. And then the flip side of that coin would be RE Village. I mean, it was like they looked at RE7 and then went to the complete opposite end of the spectrum for that and overwhelmed us with this gigantic factory that Heisenberg owned, and it was just so long with so many levels, so many floors. It was just too oppressive of an environment, and it didn't really feel fun. I think they need to strike a balance with the third act of the game, and they need to really pump a lot of effort into how they handle how this game ends gameplay wise. Number 9, classic character returns. Now look, I know a lot of people are looking at Leon S. Kennedy, and look, this is the most expensive Resident Evil game they ever made with the budget, and it's been the longest, I think, that they've taken to make a Resident Evil game, probably ever. And Leon is a moneymaker. I mean, people love Leon S. Kennedy. But at the same time, not saying that I don't want Leon in the game, but I would like to see Jill. I mean, Jill, just in the chronology of the games, she hasn't been in any of these games since RE5, right? And even in RE5, she didn't seem like herself. She was brainwashed for most of it, you know? Claire, I mean, it does seem somewhat odd if they're going to bring in Leon. Not that it's confirmed to bring in Leon, but if they bring in Leon and he visits the RPD, or if we visit the RPD in general, it would be a little bit odd not to have Claire, because she's as synonymous with the RPD as someone like Leon is, right? But they might be saving her for a Code Veronica remake down the line that probably won't be that far away. Carlos, I think Carlos proved himself to be a pretty likable character in RE3 remake. You know, he was this misogynistic dick in the original, and then he kind of evolved into this kind of cool stoner bro kind of guy almost in the third game that was quite, you know, charming and endearing. But Barry Burton, you know, everyone's favorite uncle, everyone's favorite father, I should say. It would be cool to see him as a 70-year-old Barry or something like that. And I know people want to see Rebecca. They've wanted to see Rebecca for a while. I know there are corners of the community that want to see what happened to Billy and see what he's up to right now. Chris Redfield, I don't really know. I mean, I'm kind of getting a bit, you know, people talk about Leon fatigue. I kind of do feel that even more so with Chris, to be honest. I mean, you know, we've had him since RE5. He's been in RE5, RE6, RE7, RE8, and then you're trying to tell me he's going to be in this one again. I'm not really salivating to see him in this game, but yeah, I'd like to see a meaningful return of a lot of older characters in the game. Number 10, Lisa Trevor. Now, this is a kind of a funny one, because before the trailer came out, she was not even on my radar whatsoever. But after that trailer and we saw that huge wiry monster, and then all the stuff that we heard about what they showed behind closed doors with, you know, the Sphere Hunter and all the big influencers. You know, even Sphere Hunter showed a snippet of audio where you could actually hear the enemy, and it was the same exact sound as Lisa Trevor from RE1 Remake. That kind of like, that kind of, I can't do it, but you get what I mean. That would be such a creepy pull from such an old game. That would be really disturbing and creepy and really sad too, that, you know, Lisa Trevor wasn't put to rest back then. You know, imagine an old Lisa Trevor with the mind of a child still somewhat. Kind of gives me the shivers. Number 11, impactful villains. I think a lot of us kind of agree that we don't want to see the villain of the week again. Not to say that a lot of the villains in the recent Resident Evil games haven't been good. I think the Baker family were fantastic. You know, Jack was this stalker character that was occasionally funny. You know, we had Marguerite that fed into that arachnophobia thing that we all have deep inside of us. Then we had Lucas, who was more of a kind of jigsaw guy who had us in rooms playing torture games. And then, you know, you had Lady D in RE Village, and of course she wasn't in it that long and she was a little bit lackluster, but we had other villains too, like Heisenberg. He was quite flamboyant and rambunctious, but I don't really want to see some sort of enigmatic cultist type stoic antagonist in this game. Kind of like Osman Sadler, you know, where he's just, there's not really much going on with him, you know, personality wise. He's not really Mr. Charisma. But I do want to see a villain that is, I'd like to see a villain that has a moral compass, but a twisted moral compass, if you know what I mean. Where they believe they're doing right, but they're really not. But you can understand why they're doing what they're doing. Kind of like Thanos in the Marvel movies, you know. But one villain that people keep talking about is Wesker. And I mean, God, how would I react if Wesker came back? And how would they even bring him back? Like, I guess somehow they could bring him back. Somehow? Somehow
they could bring him back. I bet.
if he came back, I'd probably scream. I don't know. I'm not really the biggest fan of bringing Wesker back, but we'll see. This brings me on to number 12. Good boss fights. I'm not saying that Resident Evil doesn't have memorable boss fights. I think a lot of the boss fights are memorable because of the setting of it and the soundtrack behind it and just how epic the kind of spectacle of some boss fights are. But I kind of do feel as if a lot of boss fights in Resident Evil, in terms of design and challenge, just aren't really all that complex. I'd love if we had a boss that felt more like a puzzle, you know? Instead of just having to find the weak spot, find this big giant eye to shoot it, to leak all the pus out of it disgustingly, you know. I would like more of a thinking man's boss fight, you know. And again, I don't really want boss fights to teeter on silliness either. I mean, just look at anything from RE6, you know, you had a dinosaur boss fight. Look at the Simmons boss fight. I mean, there's a lot of boss fights that are just kind of, they really just are so over the top that it becomes tone deaf to the rest of the series. Whereas you look at G1 and RE2, I mean, yeah, I wouldn't say it's complex, but it does seem quite grounded and horror based, and he's kind of, you know, there's smoke and he pops out every now and then, and he's quite difficult. It's hard to run around that place, and you know, I just would like boss fights that are a fair challenge, thematically make sense with the game. They don't go too silly. I mean, even another example would be RE3 remake. Like, you're really trying to tell me that a small petite female police officer is decimating a skyscraper sized monster. I kind of mentally check out sometimes with Resident Evil boss fights, but yeah, I just hope we have good boss fights that are kind of somewhat grounded in the reality that we believe in Resident Evil, and then somewhat of a thinking man's fight too. Number 13, no buggy mechanics. I kind of say this because I know the RE engine does have a lot of quirks to it, and the one game that I think showed a lot of that is probably RE4 Remake. I don't know how much time you put into that game, but depending on how many hours you have in it, you will probably see a lot of issues with the gun combat in the game. I mean, just play maybe 10 minutes of the shooting gallery in that game and you'll know what I'm talking about. The bullet bloom, the bullet spread is, in my opinion, the worst it's ever been. Now, that could have been partially deliberate on Capcom's behalf to try and make things a little bit more challenging. You know, it's Leon doesn't have a steady hand. Maybe it's some slight kind of twisted homage to, you know, Leon's hand. That's just, you know, the laser not steady in the original RE4. But again, it's in RE4 Remake, it just seemed like more of an annoyance, more of a frustration. I mean, sometimes you aim your weapon and you unaim, but you can't aim it again instantly. And after you reload, it takes you a long time to aim your weapon again. There were just some weird funny things going on with the gameplay in that game. Don't get me wrong, I love RE4 Remake. I think it's almost a home run, but that was my biggest issue with the game, and I hope RE9 learns from that. You know, I really hope they polish the gameplay mechanics. I hope nothing is too clunky or too jank, or I hope there's consistency with everything, and I hope it just feels really polished everywhere. Number 14, enemy variety. I mean, I'm looking at RE7 this time. I mean, enemy variety is a big one in Resident Evil. Speaking of RE4, RE4 did an amazing job with enemy variety. But I will say that was somewhat piggybacking off the original, because a lot of the enemies were already there and laid out for them, and they just had to almost copy and paste them, rework them a little bit, make them a little bit more interesting. RE9 might have a bit of a challenge creating enemy variety, because it has kind of nothing to draw from in a way. You know, it's not a remake. They kind of have to start at the bottom of the mountain here and then work their way up and build from the ground up, literally. New enemies, new designs, new animations, new gore features, you know. It's going to be a challenge for them for sure. And if you could go back to RE7 and look at that game, as much as I love RE7, I have to admit the enemy variety in that game was a painfully dry. All you had was essentially the zombie molded, the liquor molded, and the bloated molded, and that was it. RE7 was blessed with the fact that I had a really interesting Baker family, that they were the main antagonists of the game. And I do know that Capcom probably adopted this ethos of less is more with RE7. I get it. You can hear a pin drop in that game, and the environment itself feels like a character, so it didn't really affect my enjoyment all that much in RE7. But I think RE7 is a much different game to what this game is being presented to us as, because it's just such a huge undertaking this time, as opposed to just some shy new entry in a series like RE7, just to kind of dip their toes in the water, just to see if people still like survival horror again. This is different. They know what people like now. Number 15, no modes that are tacked on. Now, what I mean by that is that might be a difficult one to understand, but for example, in RE2 Remake, when you played it for the first time, when you finished it, and it was amazing, it was just, incredible, can't believe they did this. Then we realized there was a B scenario, and it was like, oh my god, there's a B scenario, what? Like just like the original, everyone was just blown away by that. But then you play it for the first hour, and you realize it's kind of just the same game. There wasn't much of a difference. You started off in a slightly different area, you had different weapons, it wasn't that different. You just started off in a slightly different area. You had one different weapon in the beginning, there's different ammo, the puzzle solutions are a bit different, and then there's an extra boss fight in the very end of the game, And I do feel as if Capcom just slapped that on at the end of Resident Evil 2. I feel like they made Resident Evil 2 a great game, and then realized, oh shit, last minute they were like, god, we forgot there was a B scenario in the original, so let's just do our own little B scenario. We can't call it a B scenario because it's not really a zapping system. Let's just call it second run. Like it's like this alternate reality of what it would have been like to be the other character, and But yeah, I hope RE9 does add some modes that will be fun. I mean, Ethan Must Die was a fun one. Is that what it's called? Ethan Must Die. I remember that one being pretty fun. And some of the hunk modes. I mean, the speedrunner in me kind of wants a mode that's shorter so we can speedrun maybe. And then even just mercenary mode. I liked Mercenaries from RE4 Remake. I thought it was pretty good. So yeah, I hope they don't really just try to add just shallow content to the game. Number 16, a merchant. Now I had a question mark on that one because I don't really know if I want a merchant per se, but the one thing that I think is good about a merchant and a currency system is that you do kind of create builds of inventory in the likes of RE4 and RE8. Not to say that we're playing bloody Bloodborne here, but you know what I'm trying to say? It kind of gives you agency with what you want to do, with how you want your inventory to look. Now I know you can do that with a box, but a merchant adds a lot more complexity to that, and you can sell things, you can buy things, and it just gives you more choices. Maybe it just gives you the illusion of more choice, but I really enjoyed the fact that we could use money in RE Village and RE4 Remake. Now again, I don't really know if I want it to be the merchant or the duke, or some guy that sells you stuff. It could be some other way to kind of achieve that same thing. It could be some sort of vending machine with a voice or something. Like on second thought, that's a terrible idea. Scratch that. I don't know what the fuck I was talking about. But I'm just spitballing here. I just want something that's kind of gonna give me the same thing as what the merchant and the duke gave me. Number 17, an intriguing mystery. This is something that is pretty obviously present in the game already with the limited things that we know. I mean, it is literally a mystery. Like, you're playing as Grace Ashcroft. She's an FBI analyst, isn't she? And she's investigating murders, and it's tied back to her mother's murder back 8 years before that in a hotel. And this game is shrouded in mystery, and I think games like RE7 really did well because they kept that game shrouded in mystery for months and months and months, and fed us multiple demos that just gave us weird updates that just made us all kind of think, just made us all go into a frenzy theorizing what this game could be about. So I think the mystery in this game should be right at the forefront because there's fear in the unknown. Number 18, a satisfying conclusion. There's talks that this game is going to be somewhat of a conclusion to the main Resident Evil story, and that the next few Resident Evil games after this are either going to be remakes or kind of like an almost anthology type thing where they're not really related. Not sure how true that is, but if this is going to be some sort of dramatic conclusion, I want it to be a meaningful conclusion. I'd like it if Capcom grew some balls in this way where they could maybe kill off a big character in the game and really tug on our heartstrings and have events occur in the game that will actually have real repercussions and real consequences in the story. If it is going to be a send-off in some fashion, I think there'd be no better time to do it with the 30th anniversary. Number 19, replayability. The replayability is quite varied depending on the Resident Evil game. I feel like Resident Evil 4 was pretty good with replayability because of the merchant and a lot of weapons that you could upgrade, and you wanted to go see what it was like to use this weapon and upgrade this fully and then go back, But I think the fact that this game is really large, I think that is a good thing for replayability, because I don't really want this game to be a one and done, so to speak. I liked Ori Village a lot, but for some reason I did feel like it was a one and done. I didn't really have much of a compulsion to go back and play it again. Although I do actually want to go back and play it again. I said that recently. I don't really want Ori 9 to be that game where I'm like, okay, let me just go back to Ori 2 and speedrun that for 2 years until Code Veronica Remake comes out. I want it to be a game where there's a lot of meat on the bones and we can just tear it all off and experiment with it and just find a lot of different ways and secrets and Easter eggs and really enjoy the areas in the game and just soak it all in as the best we can. But replayability, I mean, we'll just have to wait and see. I hope we can play it over and over again in many different ways. The fact that it's first and third person will probably help that. You could do first person playthroughs and third person playthroughs. You could do little challenges with that, I'd say. Number 20, a randomizer. I'm kind of laughing when I'm saying that because I know it's such a far-fetched one, and I know it's obviously not really the smartest thing for Capcom to be doing future financially, if that makes sense, if you know what I'm trying to say, because they want you to buy the next Resident Evil game and the next one after that and the next one after that. But man, you guys gotta check out what Namsku has been doing over on Twitch. Like, the guy is just a genius. These randomizers are incredible. Like these randomizers are able to change doors, door locations, where the keys go in, where the keys are situated, where the puzzles are, the puzzle solutions, items, everything you can think of is basically randomized. Enemies are randomized. Like, look, it's an amazing way to watch the game, and you can play the game first time again, and it would just be cool to see Capcom do their own built-in randomizer. It wouldn't even have to be as extensive as something like Namsku's mod, but just have some sort of randomizer where there's some basic sliders in it, before we play. That would be pretty cool, I think. But again, I don't think that's going to happen. That's kind of wishful thinking. And last but not least, number 21, I hope it's a fun speedrun. Now I know, relax, chill out. Okay, chill. There's a reason why I put this as number 21 at the very last of my list, because all the rest of the other points that I just said today, they're a priority over a good speedrun. If it's a fun speedrun, happy days. If not, okay, we'll move on. It's okay. But I do hope it's a good speedrun. I hope that we're going to be able to really lab this game out and figure out cool strats. And, I am a speedrunner of Ori 2 Remake, so there's a part of my DNA that is just kind of hoping for something like this. I wouldn't mind if I was able to kind of move over from Ori 2 and speedrun this seriously now, And when the game comes out, I hope that, there's going to be no toxicity in the discords. I mean, probably impossible for that not to happen. I just hope that we can experience something that has a decent skill ceiling, mechanics that are not too frustrating to deal with, a decent amount of RNG in the game. I hope it's not too long. I hope it's not too short. I hope it's a good length. And yeah, I just hope we can break some records in this game one day. And that's it. I don't really have anything else to say. Thank you so much for stopping by and watching this all the way through. If you have any things that you hope Resident Evil 9 does as well, by all means, drop me a comment. If you think I missed anything, if you disagree with anything I said there, fight me. But yeah, I really appreciate it. I'm looking to get out a lot more on YouTube. Yeah, viva la Resident Evil. And Capcom, please just get rid of the yellow tape.